My name is Bob Clifford from Clifford Law in Chicago, and I'm here today with my law partner, Tracy Brandmeier, and also my colleagues from the Kreinler & Kreinler firm from New York, Mr. Brian Alexander, and we represent Rachel Crafton and her family. Rachel is up on the stage with us here, as is her brother-in-law, Daley Crafton, the brother of the decedent. We are here to tell you that this morning a lawsuit was filed on behalf of the estate of Casey Crafton, survived by his wife and 3 children. Casey perished in the crash of American Eagle plane 5342 here in Washington on January 29, 2025. That crash is still being investigated, of course, by the authorities. And because of the litigation that will now unfold and be pursued, the families will seek the answers to the very questions that they have. They will be seeking the accountability that they are owed, and they will ultimately be seeking the legacy that they are owed, as are their loved ones, to make sure that a disaster like this never occurs again, either here in Washington or anywhere in America. The crash of American Eagle 5342 was predictable, it was preventable, and caused the needless loss of 67 lives on that fateful evening. In the lawsuit today, the first named defendant is American Airlines, operating as a regional carrier with PSA, along with the United States of America. The complaint, which is on file and is now publicly available, is 110 pages long. It has been painstakingly crafted by a group of lawyers from all of the families. The normal practice in a case like this is that the court will encourage all of the counsel for the various families to get together and get organized and act as one, because this is a consolidated event. Why and how everything occurred is common to everyone on that plane, but each and every family's damages are different. So in this first lawsuit filed in the federal district court for here in Washington in the District of Columbia will serve as a guiding complaint for the rest of the families to follow. Because we uniquely are in a position of suing the federal government, and there are rules regarding the right to sue the federal government, we had to file, all the families have to file what's called a Form 95. It's a document that asserts that a claim is being made against the government, and the government has 6 months in which to accept or deny the claim, and they always deny it, and they usually wait until the 5th month and 29th day. But because of Rachel Crafton having been the first to file that claim, I filed that claim right after she was retained me as counsel. We are in a position of getting that complaint on file, and it includes the claim against American, and we are joined by our co-counsel in this representation, the Kreinler & Kreinler firm and Spicer Krause out of New York, because all of the families want to seek those answers, and they want to do so as expeditiously as possible, but the others cannot yet file suits. When they do, they'll file them in the federal court, presumably, and the court will consolidate these cases together for the litigation discovery that will unfold. We sued American Airlines and PSA because they are the common carrier that was entrusted with the responsibility to provide the care and safety at the highest degree possible for the traveling public. A common carrier has a duty. It's not just a duty to avoid negligence. Operators of a motor vehicle can't run through a red light. Operators of a commercial aircraft cannot run through yellow lights. And they ran blatantly for years, many red lights here, by allowing these planes to operate in the navigable space at DCA, knowing that there was massive congestion, that there was a massive intersection between military traffic regarding runways that were unique and required special training that they failed to provide to their pilots. The complaint against American is set out in a way that emphasizes their responsibility. All of you are familiar, of course, with the recent hearings that were conducted here in Washington by the NTSB investigating this crash. That investigation is focused on the probable cause of what happened that day. But that investigation is not as wide in scope as is necessary for the families to fully understand what American knew, when they knew it, and what they could have done to prevent it. And it is known that American had the ability, because of their notice of near misses, a massive number of near misses, that they nevertheless allowed their customers to be exposed to the dangers associated with those near misses, even though they sought additional gates, they sought additional landings and takeoffs, and they did everything possible to maximize their ability to shuttle passengers in and out of that airport. So there is that focus in the complaint on the fact that there's a corporate negligence and accountability that existed for a long time before that fateful night. Then the complaint does complain about and focuses on the conduct of the pilots that evening. And I know it's tough for some people to hear, but I assure you that all the lawyers associated with this case have consulted with experts of the highest caliber, integrity, and credibility who do in fact have things to say about the performance of the pilots that night that could have prevented this disaster. Whether it was associated between accepting the runway that they used, or it was associated with the 19 seconds that they had to respond to the alerts about traffic that, to the best of our knowledge from the record, were not responded to at all, and that, we believe, is a responsibility that they had that night. And I say that with all due respect to the fact that those people lost their lives as well. But had the Army done what it was supposed to do, had the FAA done what it was supposed to do, none of this would happen. And that's where, if you look in the body of the complaint, we turn to the FAA and we talk about the fact that the FAA allowed this environment to exist, knowing that there was massive congestion and these number of near misses. We turn to the FAA and their responsibility to properly provide air traffic control that was not fully provided and properly provided on that evening. And so you'll find, folks, if you review that complaint, that the records are replete with information that had people paid attention to it, people who are entrusted with the safe passage of the passengers on that flight, the 60 passengers, plus the 4 crew, plus the 3 individuals in the helicopter. This disaster, these 67 souls would never have lost their lives that evening. I would like to take the time to introduce you to Mr. Daley Crafton. Mr. Daley Crafton is the brother of Casey. Daley has been known to many of you already, and he would like to respond to a couple of the questions he's already received, and also to supply some remarks for you today. Daley?
Thank you, Bob. My name is Daley Crafton. Hello and good afternoon. Brother of Casey Crafton, I would like to share the following remarks on behalf of my sister-in-law, Rachel Crafton, Casey's wife of 16 years and mother of their 3 sons. Nearly 8 months ago, our loved one, Casey Crafton, and 66 other people were killed when a U.S. Army Black Hawk helicopter collided with American Eagle Flight 5342 and nearly 8 months ago, our lives were shattered in a moment, and the grief has been unimaginable. The future we dreamed about was taken away from us. Casey was a devoted father and husband, and we built a beautiful life together. He was a loving brother, a supportive son, a committed employee, a selfless friend, and he made everyone around him feel valued and respected. The world was a better place because he was in it. Because of this avoidable tragedy, my young sons and I have to go through life without the love, support, guidance, and laughter Casey gave to us on a daily basis. I'm left to raise our sons alone, and these days, weeks, and months have been unbearable as grief weighs heavily over every moment that should have been a celebration with Casey. His entire career was in the aviation industry, first as an aviation mechanic, and then as a technical service manager, and he was very dedicated to bettering himself and the systems he worked within. His honesty, attention to detail, and standard of safety was second to none, yet because of systemic failures and reckless disregard for safety, his life, along with 66 others, was taken. Casey was betrayed by the system he trusted. We all were. As his wife, I cannot stand by and allow his life to be lost in vain. Today we are taking legal action because the accountability of American Airlines, PSA Airlines, and the Army and FAA is the only way to ensure this never happens again and no other families have to live with the pain we have to endure each day without Casey.
Introduce Mr. Brian Alexander from the law firm of Kreinler & Kreinler in New York and elsewhere.
Thank you, Bob. My name is Brian Alexander, and I'm a partner with the law firm of Kreinler & Kreinler, and we have the honor of representing 34 families who lost loved ones in this terrible, preventable crash. Bob spent a couple minutes talking about the culpability of the airlines, but the lawsuit will also address the complete and total failure of the Army helicopter crew to follow basic fundamental principles of flight, namely the duty to see and avoid the American jet. And as a former Army aviator, someone who was assigned to that very same unit, someone who flew up and down that river on that route hundreds of times, it is deeply distressing to me that this occurred, and the conduct of the helicopter crew was so inexcusable. The lawsuit will also address air traffic control. And the way to think about air traffic control is the controllers are basically the lifeguards for our aviation system. They're the ones watching over to make sure that everybody's doing what they're supposed to do. And if they're not, to make sure to take action to make it safe and to prevent accidents. The primary duty of an air traffic controller is to separate traffic and to avoid mid-air collisions. In this particular case, they completely failed to meet that responsibility. And specifically, among many other things, the controllers here failed to issue a safety alert to the aircraft, advising them to immediately change course to avoid the mid-air collision. These are the two cornerstones of the lawsuit and our effort to bring these parties to justice and to also answer additional questions and to help the families in their effort to make sure it never happens again. No one here can possibly imagine what the families are going through, the devastation that has been caused as a result of this terrible crash. Their lives will never, ever be the same. They are completely and forever changed. They grieve each and every day for the loss of their loved ones. And yet, each and every day, they tirelessly work to improve the aviation system for the flying public and to make sure that this does not happen again. And I'm proud and privileged to introduce Doug Lane, who lost his wonderful and beautiful wife, Christine, and his amazing and talented son, Spencer. And he will be talking to you about those efforts to make our system safe. Doug?
While today is about Casey Crafton and his beautiful family, I, along with a number of other family members affected by this collision, are here to deliver the message that that the Crafton family are not on this journey alone. Over 120 of us that were affected by this tragedy have banded together to become something both beautiful and powerful. We've supported each other through birthdays, anniversaries, holidays, weddings that were planned but never held, Little League and figure skating seasons that started with missing coaches, missing competitors, and missing parents in the stands. We've also turned our grief into action. We've collaborated with Congress on critical air safety reforms. We've secured a much-needed set of oversight investigations into the FAA, and we will not rest until similar investigations are underway into the U.S. Army. And we'll bring that same level of passion and relentlessness as we seek accountability and change through the legal process. Many of us have been asked whether we dread the idea of rehashing the worst days of our lives in court. Our answer today is clear. We're ready. Nothing will help our healing process more than seeing the negligence, bureaucracy run amok, and the instances of putting corporate profits over public safety on full display. And we are here to see this process through, however long it takes, to ensure that our family members have a lasting legacy that makes the world safer for everyone who flies. Thank you.
We will now open things up for questions from the media. We would ask you to please identify yourself and your affiliation and direct your questions to the members in front. Thank you.
Okay, no questions, we can go home.
I think we got a couple.
Hi, Will Geisbon at the Air Current. Thanks for having us. Perhaps a question for the council, if you could give an indication of perhaps how many other families have filed complaints with the government and how many you may expect to be. I realize it's a tricky question if you don't represent them directly, but just a ballpark to understand.
Oh, sure. To the best of my knowledge, the majority of families have filed claim forms with the U.S. government. A claim form is not a lawsuit.
Right.
So a precondition to suing the government is this Form 95 claim form. That starts the clock. You cannot sue the government before them, unlike the ability to sue American. You could have sued American the day after the crash. So that's part one. Part two, when any other family now files, if they do file in the federal district court, because of the docketing statement that you must accompany with your complaint, you have to check off, is there a related case? That will get checked off. I just looked at my phone a moment ago to see if we've gotten an assignment yet. We don't yet have an assigned judge yet. We will hopefully by the end of the day, or the clerk's office tells us first thing in the morning. Once that docketing statement for a new filing does take place, routinely the clerk's office would send that lawsuit to that judge, and then as many more come in and the same process unfolds, the judge at some juncture, she will decide, he will decide whether to consolidate them into one proceeding, which would likely be the case. So for an example, I currently serve as lead counsel for all the families against Boeing in the crash of Ethiopian Airlines Flight 302 in March of 2019. All of the cases filed there, 140 cases were filed. They were consolidated ultimately before the same federal district court judge in Chicago.
Thank you.
I'm Vinay Simlat with Nexstar. You mentioned that you thought that American Airlines and PSA didn't provide adequate training or special training to the pilots on approach to DCA. Could you tell us a little bit more about what you think they should have provided?
Well, certainly in two parts. One is a thread that we're pulling that we don't have the subpoena power until you file a lawsuit. I can't go knocking on someone's door and make them talk to me. With a lawsuit, now we have the power of the court behind us. So to begin with, we will be permitted now, under court supervision, to issue specific discovery requests against the airlines or anyone else we choose to seek information from. And on information and belief, we think that there has been a history of specific training that did go on for DCA that at one point in time historically was stopped. So that's part one, and that's based upon our work product and investigation to date. So that is that part of the information I think you're seeking. And the next part will come when we have the right to take depositions of the individuals or who are with American and PSA to dive into the specific training they did or did not give to their pilots for DCA.
If I can just add to that, Bob, there are things we know already, but Bob's making an excellent point. This is the beginning of our ability to dig into and retrieve valuable information about exactly why the accident happened in every respect, and specifically on this point to determine everything the airline knew ahead of time and all of their failures and shortcomings with respect to advising and training their crews. But what we do already know from the NTSB's smaller investigation is that there were at least many pilots at PSA that were not even aware of the existence of the helicopter routes in close proximity to DCA Airport, and specifically more or less in the way of a runway 33 circling approach. So there's more to come on that, but that's an example of the information that we expect to find.
And to supplement that just a little bit, be mindful of what I said in my opening remarks. The NTSB is not focused on this feature of the liability that we see on behalf of the families. They focus on the probable cause of what occurred that day, and the scope of their inquiry is not as broad. Certainly it came out during the NTSB hearing cycle that there were all these near misses, but they will not have the resources, they will not have the subpoena power that we will have now to dive into that specifically to know exactly what American knew, when they knew it, and what they did or didn't do about it. And we have, once again, through our investigation, talked to sources that have told us that the airlines in fact knew all of these details that was referenced during the disclosure during the hearings about the near misses.
Homa Bash with Fox 5 DC. I know there is some movement in Congress, there are the NTSB recommendations, but realistically, what is a timeline for this lawsuit to move through? You're seeking a jury trial and a timeline for some actionable items to go underway.
Sure. The timeline on the lawsuit is oftentimes, and it's obviously up to the court, but when we counsel clients, we typically tell them that the average time of a lawsuit can be 2 to 3 years. Some cases take longer. COVID interfered and wreaked havoc throughout the litigation cycle of across America. That lawsuit is separate and distinct from the efforts that you've heard discussed today by Doug when the families are out there as a real force in Congress. Lobbying, getting the likes of Senator Cruz and others behind their efforts for change, and that, of course, that's up to the Congress. I hope I answered your question.
Yeah, and this is Doug. I can speak a little bit to the advocacy work that we've been doing and where that stands. So we have a total of 3 bills to date that have been introduced in the Senate. First by Senator Moran of Kansas, where the flight originated. Second by Senator Maria Cantwell from Washington, and then most recently the Rudder Act, which was introduced by Senator Ted Cruz, who's the chairman of the Commerce Committee that oversees the industry. Those things now need to come together into one bipartisan bill that, and that work is happening. So we're very encouraged that the two sides are coming to the table, and we feel like we are in very short order going to see a bipartisan bill reach committee, and we will continue to engage with both sides of the aisle to make that happen. In parallel, we've also worked with some of the appropriations committees to add language to both the Transportation, Housing, and Urban Development Appropriations Bill and the National Defense Authorization Act to advance some of our priorities that way. So we have a lot of different threads that we're pulling, and we will continue to push for those. We also continue to engage with the executive branch, with Secretary Duffy and his team, Administrator Bedford, and most recently, we've now begun an active dialogue with the U.S. Army as well. So we will keep fighting on those avenues in parallel to our work on the legal action.
Tom Rousley with WJLA here in D.C. Just wanted to add a two-part question. One, just wanted to clarify what you're announcing today, although you said there could be consolidation later. This is one lawsuit representing 34 families, correct?
No, this is one lawsuit representing one family.
Okay, so it's just for one family.
That's correct.
As Bob explained earlier, all of the other notices of claim that are required under the Federal Tort Claims Act have or will be filed. They're almost all filed at this point. And depending on the lapse of the 6-month required notice period, subsequent suits will be filed. Many of those are becoming ripe in the next coming days and weeks and months. So you can expect to see all the lawsuits filed probably by the end of the year or shortly thereafter.
Okay. Sorry, I was a little unclear on that. Thank you. Yeah. And then just part two is what specifically are you demanding in this lawsuit? I know you said you want accountability. I mean, are you demanding changes by the government? Are you demanding monetary damages, both?
In a lawsuit like this, the end result will ultimately be a monetary award to the family reached either by settlement or trial. Remember that under federal law, a case against the government is tried before the court. It's a non-jury trial before a federal judge. Here you have the case coupled with a case against commercial operators, and that is the right to trial by jury, and our complaint does ask for a jury trial. What normally would occur in practice is that the federal judge, if there is a trial, will have the jury hear all of the evidence, and the jury's decision on monetary damages will apply to the case against the airlines, and he or she will take the jury's decision as advisory to herself about what the award should be against the government. And it's only one award, ultimately. It's a combined award. It's not multiple jury verdicts, but it's a joint award, but it's the judge who decides what the number will be. And then finally, as it relates to change, I mentioned in my remarks legacy. You've heard Mr. Lane talk about the legislative efforts. In our space, there's a concept about graveyard justice, that here you have this terrible, awful thing has happened, and you would hope that sensible, responsible corporate citizens would take the steps necessary to improve safety around that airport, and there are others in our country, by the way, with similar issues. And so that's the change that comes about, hopefully, when you have these good people who are willing to sit in front of you, the very last place any of them want to be today, and let the message go out that their family members didn't die in vain. And hopefully the power in Congress will listen to their message, will enact laws that force change so that the likes of the FAA, the likes of the C-suite in corporate America in terms of airlines will be meaningfully responsible in making it a safer country for aviation safety.
Hi, Sam Ogzalik at Politico. Thanks for taking our questions. Just a two-part one. To follow up, you mentioned that to the best of your knowledge, majority of families have filed the claim forms of the federal government. Of the families of the 60 passengers in total, do you have an actual number or approximate number of how many lawsuits you expect to be filed in total?
Well, the lawyers... The lawyers for all of the families, I'm pretty sure we know the identity of all the lawyers on behalf of all the families, of all 67 families. And obviously, the family passengers, the 60 passengers, all of those lawyers have been working together to, we've compared notes. Down the line, once the case is up and running before the judge, it will be likely that a committee, a formal committee of the court will be formed. It would be called a plaintiff's steering committee or plaintiff's executive committee. And that committee will be empowered to engage in the discovery works, the depositions and the record requests. They're not going to say to, 10 lawyers, 15 lawyers who represent all these people, we're going to let 15 different deposition notices going to go out. We're going to force you to work together because why and how the crash occurred is common to each and every one of you. So let's have a committee appointed. That committee can work on behalf of all the families, and then the court will separately and distinctly, independently analyze the damages for the families, individual family.
So it sounds like, do you expect at least 60 total separate lawsuits?
Well, sure. I mean, if you look in the crash of ET-302, 157 people died. There were 13 families who, in direct dealing with Boeing before any lawsuit was filed, settled those cases on their own. As they have the right to do, by the way, with counsel. And then 144 cases were filed. Here, one of the interesting things here is, and this is all informal chatter, of course, between lawyers, but thus far, the only message we've received from American Airlines and their lawyers and their insurers is, this is not our problem. We didn't cause this crash. This helicopter ran into our airplane. Why are you even talking to us? Well, that just isn't the fact of what we will prove. We will show their responsibility. And if they were really being forthright with these families about what they really think, well, then maybe they can explain why it is that it's publicly reported that over in London they drew down massive reserves to cover for the claims that they expected from the families. So here, I don't expect the airlines or the government to talk to the families individually ahead of time to maybe settle a case so that instead of 60 lawsuits, you got 50. We don't predict that happening. There will, in all likelihood, be 60 lawsuits filed for these passenger families. And then finally, ultimately, the court will require that the families and the defendants at least explore resolution through a process called mediation. And not that anyone will ever force a family to accept a lawsuit or a settlement, but they will at least force you to talk about it, because we only have so many judges, so many juries, so many courtrooms. And if families can get together and resolve their differences, then that's what they have the right to do as well.
And then just a quick question for Doug. Thanks for the update on your efforts. You mentioned the dialogue between the families and the Army. Is there any update on an Army Inspector General probe into the crash? Anything you can say about that?
Sure. So, in terms of our engagement with the Army, we were pretty much ignored by them for about 6 months, despite repeated attempts to get a dialogue going. We were able to do it pretty quickly with Secretary Duffy and on that side of things. After we pushed very hard and even did an open letter that raised the awareness of this issue, the Secretary of the Army had a meeting with us right before the NTSB hearings, the entire family group. Subsequent to that, they've connected us with some subject matter experts in the Army Aviation group that have been answering our questions. We've had some calls with them. We have another call with them coming up later this week. And we continue to, it's a very tricky conversation because we're trying, in respect for this legal process, we don't go into these meetings trying to investigate our collision. We're trying to just better understand some of the processes and safety measures that are in place and potentially need to be improved through our advocacy. So we still think the Inspector General investigation is critical. We have not seen movement on it yet, and that's very frustrating to us. It's also very frustrating to the dozens of United States senators who requested it. So we will keep pushing for it. We will also pursue other avenues, like taking it to the Department of Defense level if we need to. So to answer your question, no, they have not acted on that, and we still continue to push for it every single day.
Thank you.
Yeah, I had a question here in the far left corner. My name is Dominique Moody with NBC Washington, and my question is really for Doug, Daly, and Rachel. I know that Brian and Bob have talked a lot about how this was preventable, how this was something that the airlines knew about and the Army could have conducted themselves a little bit better. To know that for the past 8 months you've been having to deal with this, has it been hard to digest this information and just to hear the result of what the NTSB is continuing to try to figure out?
Daly, do you want to answer that?
Yeah, I'll answer shortly. I mean, it's nearly impossible to get your head around. I just still don't understand how something so serious had so much kind of, laxness around it through like very large agencies that are supposed to be taking care of it.
Yeah, and I think from my perspective, we sat through 3 days, 12-plus hour days in some cases of NTSB hearings where we just heard over and over all of these small decisions that were made by different people and different agencies, and we just needed a couple of them to make a slightly different decision one day at work to ensure that our family members arrived safely that day. And that was very difficult. It wasn't like, one big mistake. It was a perfect storm of, whether it was negligence or whether it was just, people, kind of having an off day or whatever the case was. That was very difficult. And I think, when it comes to, it's honestly been, I think early on, and certainly in the hearings, it was very clear that the Army and the FAA were going to be held to account for this. But, the lack of attention on the airlines has been a point of frustration for me. And I kind of, if you look at, the 15,000 plus near misses over a few years that the NTSB reported in their preliminary report, and you look at the volume of flights that American Airlines has in and out of that airport every single day, I kind of liken it to imagine you put your child on a school bus every day and 3 times a week, a cement truck runs a stop sign and almost, crashes into the bus. After 3 years, the bus drivers start complaining and say, hey, this isn't really safe, but, the bus keeps going as going. When that day comes where the cement truck hits your kid and your kid dies, don't you blame the bus company a little bit for the fact that they had this ongoing risk and didn't do anything about it? And that's how I feel about the airline, where, they were in a situation that they shouldn't have been in, but they have a duty to crunch numbers, look at data, and be proactive about preventing things like this from ever happening.
Appreciate you.
And just off of that, this is Jeff Saperstone with NBC Boston. I wanted to ask any of you up there, just based off of Doug's answer there, why do you think the airlines haven't been the focus of this investigation up until this lawsuit?
Bob, if I can start to address that. I think, this is pretty common. The NTSB has done a very good job out of the gate in a very short period of time to focus on some very obvious, as I referred to, sort of cornerstones of the day of negligence with respect to the pilot conduct on the helicopter crew, and with that lack of providing a safety alert, among other things, by the air traffic controller. I think they just, as many people did initially, viewed the crew of the American Eagle Flight 5342 as, on a relative basis, less culpable because they were listening to ATC's directions and so forth and so on. But the reality is, and this is true of every case, the deeper that we dig, the more we learn. And that's one of the purposes of the lawsuit. I mentioned answers before, in addition to accountability. We first need to understand all of the information that the corporate defendant, the airlines, had, so that they could and should have made different decisions, to include the simple choice, which they could have done, to prohibit circling approaches to runway 33 at night, given all of the circumstances and the dangers that now are so quite obviously dangerous to us, and we can appreciate that as pilot and lay people, but this is information they knew all along and could have simply prevented and stopped. So we will continue to get those answers. We'll continue to get the evidence. And I think that's something that the NTSB, in their desire to get things addressed quickly, which they did not focus upon. Yeah, if there's no more questions, we appreciate everyone coming today. We will be remaining around to answer additional questions. There are other family members here who may also be available to you.
And if you all wouldn't mind, we do have some other families here who have brought photos of their loved ones and are prepared to offer a photo opportunity if anybody is interested. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.